Time to protect Southeast from human rights abuses. Time to protect Southeast from human rights abuses. Metaphor space. To my dear listeners, Metaphor has come out to say the time is now to protect the Southeast from human rights abuses. To my dear listeners from wherever you're listening from, kindly stay tuned as I read today's news. One of the most compelling arguments for the remedial secession of the Southeast region, Igbo Biafra, from Nigeria is the consistent pattern of human rights abuses perpetrated by Nigerian security forces in the region. Over the past decades, the Southeast has been subjected to widespread, systematic and state-sponsored violations of human rights, primarily targeting the Igbo people, particularly the youth and self-determination activists. These violations have raised concerns that the actions of the Nigerian government amount to a deliberate attempt at ethnic cleansing. The situation in the Southeast is distinguished by the state's disproportionate use of force against peaceful protesters and its failure to address the legitimate political grievances of the region. This continued cycle of violence and repression has driven the push for self-determination and secession as a last resort to protect the Igbo people from further harm. The Nigerian security forces, including the military, police, and other state-sponsored security agencies, have carried out numerous documented instances of human rights abuses in the Southeast region. These abuses, which include extrajudicial killings, arbitrary arrests, torture and enforced disappearances, have disproportionately affected the Igbo population, particularly those advocating for self-determination. Organizations such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and other international human rights groups have repeatedly raised concerns about the scale and intensity of the abuses committed by Nigerian security forces in the region. One of the key characteristics of these violations is their targeted nature. The security forces have specifically focused on suppressing self-determination movement in the Southeast region, Igbo Biafra, rather than addressing broader criminal or terrorist activities. Pro-Biafran activists who have been advocating for the right to self-determination through peaceful means have often been met with brutal crackdowns by the Nigerian state. Protests calling for a referendum on Biafran independence or demanding greater autonomy for the Southeast are frequently turned violent, not because of the protesters themselves, but because of the excessive use of force by the Nigerian military and police. The most notorious example of Nigerians' militarization of the southeast is Operation Python Dance, a military exercise that has been conducted in the region several times since 2017. Officially described as an operation to combat violent crimes and maintain law and order, Operation Python Dance has been widely condemned as a tool for suppressing political dissent and intimidating the Igbo population. The military's heavy-handed approach during these operations has led to numerous deaths, injuries, and arrests of unarmed civilians, particularly young Igbo men. Videos and reports have surfaced showing soldiers publicly humiliating and torturing suspected pro-Biafran activists, further exacerbating the region's sense of vulnerability and oppression. The fact that such military operations are carried out in the southeast, while similar issues of insecurity in other parts of Nigeria, such as Boko Haram, terrorism in the northeast or banditry in the northwest, are handled differently, raises concerns about the discriminatory nature of these interventions. In the northern regions, suspected terrorists or bandits are often treated with more leniency, including being offered opportunity for rehabilitation. However, in the southeast, peaceful protesters and activists are treated as enemies of the state and subjected to military-grade violence. To my dear listeners, now I've come to the end of our today's news. And now before I go in contribution to the news that I've read so far, I want to say this is one of the problems we are facing in this country. Using of full armed men on peaceful protesters, on unarmed civilians that are not doing anything. This doesn't make sense, and it is against a human rights law as well. So to my dear listeners,